Welcome to another episode of Vitals and Values. And today we are talking about a topic that's very prevalent in social media circles that I see. And it's something that David is very fond of.
I've been doing this for years.
What could we be talking about?
We are talking about intermittent fasting. Basically, it cures every disease
It's the
and it makes you live forever.
answer to any ailment that you may have with your health.
Yeah, when you
Try this.
when we get into diet culture, it's funny how there is the science and then there is marketing diet culture sensationalism.
Mhm.
And it's important to know there is some science and benefits behind intermittent fasting, but it may not be the way you think it is, and there's a lot more nuance. So
Per usual.
here we go. So break it down first and foremost from a vitals check and the science and like defining terms.
Well, yeah.
This is always an interesting one to me because people define intermittent fasting very differently. So what is your angle?
Yeah, I mean, the term intermittent fasting to me is a broad term for a couple different types of eating patterns. At least that's how I would look at it. So intermittent fasting just means that you have periods of time where you do a fast, meaning you don't eat, right? So that can be a variety of different time frames. And I think some people, when you think of fasting, you think of like these long swaths of time, like days on end without eating, but it doesn't have to be. And so another term that people use under the umbrella of intermittent fasting is this time restricted eating, meaning they're like, I set specific times that I eat and I set specific times that I don't eat.
Yeah, because breaking down this, like that's always the first one to me because back in the day I used to do a lot of TikTok lives and algorithms change and obviously focus has changed too. It's fascinating what TikTok was like a few years ago when it came to virality. I would hop on a TikTok live, put a before and after picture up, and then like basically say diets or BS or something along those lines. And I would put anywhere between 7,000 people on these TikTok lives over an hour. Like there wasn't 7 to 13, 14,000 on at a moment, but through an hour, and I would have 300 to 700 people on at any one point in time. But over that whole hour, I'd put 10,000 plus people on these things, and people would ask questions and all this kind of stuff. And that was always one to me. It's like they would say, "I'm intermittent fasting, blank, blank, blank," and I go, "Okay." Well, first off, people use intermittent fasting as this very grab bag term. And there's like time restrictive eating, which is like condensing a food window. I'm going to skip breakfast and not eat late at night.
I'm going to eat between 12 and 7.
Or whatever that, the 8-16, 8-hour eating window, 16-hour fasting window. And then there's what's like intermittent fasting in the sense of like alternate day eating, which is you eat on Monday, you don't eat on Tuesday, you eat on Wednesday, or maybe you go 2 days without eating. And then that's like, when I think of intermittent fasting, that's my gut of how I define the term. So like time restrictive feeding and intermittent fasting are different things, but they all get kind of
That's so
thrown
funny
together.
because you say that, but that's not how I've ever looked at it. I see what you're saying, but to me, intermittent fasting, like whatever, it's just you're choosing a time to fast. But hey, it's this, we get the concept, right?
Break fast.
Yes.
Break fast.
Speaking of break fast, David doesn't do that anyways.
So, all right. So one of the things, because I've been quote unquote intermittent fasting for years. I used to actually thought it meant something in the sense of like condensing your food window actually made you burn more body fat or whatever, which we'll go into science soon. But there is this, the body does adapt. And it is funny because now, while yes, I do get like on a 24-hour average, I get hungrier than most. At any point in time, I can numb myself to hunger better than most too, because I can create that pattern of like not eating for an extended period of time.
Do you think that if you start to change and lose some of those hunger cues, do you think that has a negative consequence though? This is just something that I was just thinking of.
It's a great question.
Because I have patients who they have been restricting in different ways for years, and a lot of times through intermittent fasting. And then it's like they don't seem to know how to eat because they have no cues for hunger anymore that they can recognize. I don't know. This is just popped into my head.
No, again, and that's where like there is obviously these are tools and tactics to help control things. And there is like the body does adjust to things. It is fascinating how you set such a pattern of eating at 8 a.m., 8 a.m., 8 a.m., and like when you don't eat it, you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And like you get past that behavior over extended period of time, the body goes, all right, well, I'm not used to eating, so I'm going to stop sending out hunger cues and all this kind of stuff. But like, so I'm so used to that. I don't know if this ever came up on a podcast before, but I remember the story. So I go long periods of time without eating, and it's not a big deal. But then I can eat 3,000 calories in a sitting, like it's nothing. Which there's pros and cons to that. There's quite a few cons, actually. Not saying it's the healthiest thing to do,
I, on
but
the other hand,
you are
enjoy eating all
regimented.
day.
Exactly. And I always love these people who fall for the diet culture of intermittent fasting. You don't need breakfast. Breakfast makes you fat. If you eat too many small meals throughout the day, you get fat. You're jacked. I'm not, N of one, case study of one. I find it so funny when people just say, well, if you eat all throughout the day, you're going to be fat because of insulin. And it's like, bam. Yeah, okay, gotcha. But second date mistake. Lara and I we set up a double date with
the
Sunny
dogs.
and Jojo.
Oh, sorry.
And we were going up to the beach house. And it was like the first week of the practice being open. You're like, hey, 5 o'clock, I'm out. We'll go over to the beach house. Okay, cool. We get up to the beach house, walk the beach, sunset, all that kind of stuff. And I totally forgot about dinner.
I did not.
And Lara, it's like 7:30. Sunset.
It was like 8.
It could have been 8. And she was like, hey,
do you have any
are we getting food?
I was just like, is there any?
I was like,
no.
Did
you think that at the time? Were you like, oh shoot?
I didn't even think about it.
No, but like when I asked, do you have any food? Did you think at the time, oh shoot, I didn't think about that? Oh, okay.
I didn't even. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about dinner. And
I'm thinking the whole night, what are we gonna eat?
And for me, like I'm like, oh, I go no long periods of time without eating, and whatever. But that's not a practice that you have.
I like dinner.
Yeah, and we had a couple of yogurts in the refrigerator. We hadn't fully winterized the beach house yet, and some granola, and I barely scathed out of that one.
I think I went home and ate something else. That's what I assume I did.
I'm gonna guess so. But like
it turned out okay at the end.
Intermittent fasting.
See, here's the thing. I love eating food all day. Like I love my meals. But I mean, I've gone through times in my life where I restricted food quite a bit. So I'm actually decent at restricting. I just prefer not to anymore. And so why do it?
Of eating. What's the science say? What are some of the main macro points?
What I think is interesting to look at is the different claims that you see about intermittent fasting, about how it's so beneficial for you. And so I think there's several key ones that you hear a lot. And one, so there is this idea of like you're metabolically switching. So you're changing from
the term I always hear is metabolic flexibility.
Yes. So you're going from so your body's preferred source of fuel is glucose. And so when you eat food, that's what your body's typically using to create energy. But if you're not eating a lot of glucose, like you're fasting, then your body has to start using something else eventually once it runs out. And so it switches to using fatty acids, which are turned into ketone bodies and used as fuel that way. But so there's claims that whole process is beneficial and like helps you with like fat loss and fat oxidation, and that they claim that is a big benefit to intermittent fasting. That's one thing. And then some of the other ones are insulin sensitivity. So our bodies, we want them to be sensitive and responsive to insulin. And it's very common. A lot of people are insulin resistant. And that's what leads to things like prediabetes and diabetes. And so intermittent fasting has a lot of claims that it can lead to more sensitivity to insulin due to the fact that you're eating less. You're going to have, again, less of that blood sugar and glucose going through your body. And so your bodies will become like better sensitized again to the insulin that is released in response to blood sugar. So that's another big one. And then there is this autophagy claim, which honestly is not something I talk about much, but you always seem to.
It's so funny because like when intermittent fasting was big, I mean, again, it's still around, but when it hit its big vogue about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they just championed this term autophagy. And like, again, it is so funny to me. Autophagy is a real thing. It's the body basically cleaning house. We'll say in very simple terms that when there's not enough energy and nutrients and materials around, the body's like, okay, let's let's break down and reuse some of these poor cells that aren't really working well so that we can be efficient while we're going through a period of famine. And there's a place for it. Like it actually is fascinating. This is why there's some of the argument of these rat studies, for example, when you get into intermittent fasting and extended fasting. We've never seen it in humans because it's kind of immoral to a degree, and the length of it. But it is pretty clear when you take a mouse and you put it through fasting protocols, their life, they live longer. Now, why is that? And all this kind of stuff, we have those studies. So potentially, based upon rat studies, maybe humans, as they go through periods of feast and famine, this actually goes off of our conversation. Okay, we talk about this at the kitchen table. We're going to go on a little tangent here, but I find this fascinating. Fascinating question. Okay, so there's so much data and study design done around caloric deficit. Okay, like going into an energy balance deficit, and autophagy happens, and it sloughs and cleans out bad cells and poorly functioning cells and precancerous cells and stuff like that. And how it helps with insulin sensitivity, and how it helps with this and that. It helps with all these things. So, which is actually now, but then the caveat to that is, are a lot of those things happening purely because someone is overweight? And because they're overweight, you have the metabolic harm of being overweight. So the question to me is, have we done any studies, or is there any data, or would it be fascinating to find out, is it better to like stay at within 5 to 10 pounds of your ideal body weight throughout your entire life? Or is it actually better to go through a little bit of feast and like famine and create this like cyclical cycle where you're still averaging standard deviation around the same point, but more volatile? And because of the weight loss and like the switching of of all this kind of stuff, do you actually live longer and better? Because I don't know.
Have you ever looked to see if any of those things have been done? It'd be interesting.
Because we just talked about that, and I'm just like, what's actually better for you? Because there is so much benefit behind weight loss. And so is it like, actually it's better to slowly gain weight and then lose weight and then slowly gain weight and then lose weight? Is it actually better for you? Or is it better to be like, no, stay within 5 to 10 pounds of ideal body weight throughout your entire life?
I do not know.
I don't know. I just find it fascinating. That was a whole tangent.
Well, and I think, you mentioned weight again. And so I think obviously we didn't mention that yet as one of these like benefits to intermittent fasting, but that is often the big reason that people do it is for weight management or weight loss. And so going back to the research on it, now we said all those things that are claimed, the autophagy, the fat oxidation, the metabolic switching, longevity, there's decreased inflammation, all these things. Now, is there research to support that any of those things are specific to intermittent fasting? That's the question, right?
Yes, that is the question. And what is the study? What does the data say?
There are randomized trials and meta-analysis that do generally show that intermittent fasting promotes weight loss and cardiometabolic benefits to the body. However, if the intermittent fasting, if it's not, let me rephrase it. Intermittent fasting shows no significant benefit beyond traditional caloric restriction for a lot of these benefits. So the question is it truly intermittent fasting that is causing the benefits, or is it just the caloric restriction? Exactly. And I think there are some small trials and some rat studies that do show maybe on some of these benefits, but it's not super powerful data at this point.
Yeah, and the big thing there, from like unpacking some of these these comparative trials and stuff, it's marginal at best. So it's like, again, in the scheme I'll kind of hold this to the next spot, because this is more getting into context and nuance. So from Vitals check, any more of like the hard science stuff, is there anything more you want to kind of
that was the
there?
main stuff. I just think there's all these myths around these benefits that, yes, there is those benefits to intermittent fasting, but it's not this magic solution. It is just one of these strategies that you can potentially use for caloric restriction. Yep. Would you agree?
That's where I've always go back to a couple of these comparative, like these meta-analyses where I actually compare this, and it turns into nothing burger once you control for calories. And whether you do intermittent fasting or continual energy restriction, once the calories are equated between it, it just doesn't really matter. Now, there's a little bit of insulin resistant data, and there's a little bit of something else that may have independent potential
But it's not
benefit.
like they're not big.
It's not
It's not
magic.
big.
It's not big.
And I mean, as research comes out, if we see that there are more human large trials on this that change our minds, we would change our minds, but we're not
Mhm.
there yet.
We're not there yet. Now, as we get more into context and nuance and like values check on this whole bit, it's super important, like kind of unpacking for myself personally. It's like, from my personal thing, I've kind of set the pattern where I have no problem eating my 33 to 3,500 calories a day. And I find it easier to maintain a calorie intake of what I want to by pushing my first meal to like noon ish. Okay. I'm not afraid of breakfast, but in like we've had breakfast a couple. I will admit,
What?
she teases me, and I get the tease. The couple times when I have like a meeting brunch, and Lara's at the practice,
I'm
and
working hard.
I'm going to like a meeting brunch. Why can't we get breakfast and brunch?
He goes to all the fun restaurants and coffee shops with his business friends, and I don't get to go.
And there's something, breakfast is so good.
It is so
Brunch
good.
is so good. But like I'm not afraid of breakfast, but it's a behavior that helps. And that's like the whole idea of like getting into the nuance of it all. It comes down to calories primarily, but plenty of people have no desire to track their calories, to weigh their food, to do this stuff. And if condensing your food window can create the behavior to control and restrict calories, then great. Like you don't have to track calories in order to build a deficit and get into a better behavior, but it is a strategy to do so. But I want to talk about the flip side here, because from epidemiologic studies actually show the exact opposite, which is so funny when these intermittent fasting, like fad diet zealots always talk about how breakfast is bad for you and condense you shouldn't eat 5 meals a day and all this kind of stuff. It is so funny because from an epidemiologic standpoint, the data is pretty clear. The more people skip breakfast, the higher incidence rates of prediabetes, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, obesity. Now, let me unpack it because, like, wait, you're saying that if I skip breakfast, I'm actually going to create it?
Lurking variables?
Lurking variables. Selection bias. Now, again, it goes into, from my point of view, am I afraid of skipping breakfast that's going to make me insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, obese? No. But you got to go into the mindset of this person that tends to skip breakfast. Most people are not intentionally skipping breakfast. They are running by the seat of their pants. They have,
Don't got the time.
yeah, they don't have a behavior pattern set. And so the general consensus is it's not that skipping breakfast makes you at really a worry of obesity, type diabetes. The person who skips breakfast tends to not eat throughout a long period of the day, and then they tend to just binge in the afternoon, evening on whatever's available. And so on a 24-hour average of caloric intake, they're not waiting till noon to eat a grilled chicken salad. They're waiting till noon to 3 to go get McDonald's, French fries, a large Coke, and an onion ring. And like that's the general selection bias of the people who skip breakfast. They don't have a nutritional behavior.
Or you skip breakfast, you go into the office, there's donuts, so you eat one of those. Then you grab a bag of chips at 10 because you're hungry. So, and it's like, again, it's just not that structured, healthy routine.
Exactly. There's no routine. And the people who tend to eat breakfast tend to have an intentional nutritional routine. So I want to make sure it's known, like there are epidemiologic studies that suggest that skipping breakfast increases obesity. So it is so funny to me how the same people who say intermittent fasting is so important and eating too many meals is why you're getting fat and insulin resistant. And it's like, no, like that's not what the data suggests. It's just the angle is that whole bit. But yeah, I just find it so interesting because coming from someone that actually does kind of enjoy intermittent fasting, it's not rocket science, and it's just a strategy to help control calories.
Great. Now, on a whole other note,
What do you got?
so I was thinking about fasting in general. That's the term we're talking about, right? And when I was growing up, I don't remember people intermittent fasting, and the only time to me that concept was talked about was in a spiritual sense. So people fast or went through fast period in all different religions and cultures for as a spiritual discipline to kind of remove worldly things from what they were doing and thinking about and to focus more on God. And I was just thinking about that earlier. I was like, when did it switch to becoming this like spiritual discipline to something we're doing for us, for ourselves, to look better, to lose weight? I just think, isn't that an interesting dichotomy and switch?
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating because I think you get into that whole world. And number one, in general, especially in America and the world, faith is the general faith of the average person is getting less, not more.
Huh?
And it's getting more self-indulgent, more how I feel, my truth, all this kind of stuff. Not ultimate truth, not godly truth, but my truth.
Whatever I think is
Gonna offend
right.
some people. I even said that. Well, my truth is, well, I'm sorry, your truth doesn't actually always matter. I'm sorry, but I digress. But that whole thing, and it's like, well, people find ways to justify what they're doing based upon older context. So like I sit there and go, well, of course Jesus fasted because we know all this new science that why he fasted. He fasted because of autophagy.
Have you heard people actually say that? Oh, that's crazy.
Oh, I've heard it all. Like on social media, again, people try to justify what they're doing, and they're like, "Well, Jesus fasted."
And they're saying
Eh,
he fasted for his health benefits.
yeah, but he just knew it before it because he was
Oh,
God.
whatever. I'm sorry.
Well, actually,
That's so
this
dumb.
funny enough, sometimes these people also like they're atheists, but they'll use the Jesus fasted argument to try to justify why they're doing it in and of itself. And I'm like,
That is taking something completely out of context.
but the fasting realm in that bit is fascinating because from a biblical lens, it's quite. I'm no biblical scholar.
Uh-huh.
Not even close. But from my understanding of reading into the fasting spiritual nature, you're not supposed to talk about it because as
Right.
soon as you
Yeah.
give it from a spiritual lens, as soon as you give it this glorification of your individual needs of use, it's now becoming a sinful nature for yourself and you're not actually doing it for God anymore.
You're doing it for you and for how people now perceive you and not for
So,
your
I'm fasting. Like
Yeah.
it's like Lent.
Yeah, well, people do it all
I'm
the time at
sorry,
Lent. I
like,
know that it's so true.
it's like it's pretty clear that if you're fasting, you don't talk about your fast to the general population because now you're using it for your own significance of worldly people, not to actually fast for God's
I mean, it's so typical of us humans, right? We took something that had a good intention and we spun it
spun it
for
for
our
our
own
own
benefit.
self-indulgence.
And so, I mean, I feel like there's something to like our own control. Like we want control. And so we're like, I have control. If I do intermittent fasting, I have this control over my health and what I'm doing. And so we feel like we have more power that way,
Mm,
as opposed to what fasting was traditionally used for,
mhm.
which I just think is interesting.
Now go back to the mindset of
Yep.
intermittent fasting and intermittent like time restrictive eating. It is interesting because there is something to be said. This is where like diet culture does have its place depending on the type of person you are. Because again, I'll never forget. I was doing a TikTok live and someone was commenting like, "Hey, I'm doing OMAD and not losing weight. OMAD is eating one meal a day." And it was the same concept where, well, if I don't eat for 23 hours a day and I only eat for an hour, I'm keeping my insulin really low. And if I keep my insulin really low, I'm going to lose weight. That's not how it works. And so this guy was like, I'm eating one meal a day and I'm not losing weight, man. I'm 400 pounds. I'm not losing weight. I'm like, okay, what are you eating? And this guy, like, seriously was like, well, I'm eating a large Jets pizza. And like, you should remember when I make the joke. And I'm like, whatever diet culture, and it's like, especially intermittent fasting, I would make the joke and I go, if you believe intermittent fasting or OMAD inherently makes you burn body fat and makes you healthier, I'll challenge you and say, go OMAD, eat one meal a day, eat an extra large Jets pizza with 3 cups of ranch, a large Mountain Dew, and a chocolate lava cake, and tell me if you lose weight. And that's what this guy was doing.
Huh.
He was literally doing that, 400 pounds. He was like, I'm just doing what they told me. They said, if you eat one meal a day and condense that food window, you're going to lose weight. And if you're over-consuming calories, especially carbs and fats and very little protein, it's not going to work. And so like the context and nuance, but with that being said, if you're prioritizing whole foods, you're prioritizing protein, for the average person, that little barrier of I'm not eating till noon and I'm not eating past 8 o'clock is enough of a restrictive mindset to create the caloric behavior they want to create without pulling out a food scale, weighing everything out, and really being intentional with exactly how many calories they're
Right.
consuming. So again, it has its place and it's a strategy.
Now, okay, so years back, when I would restrict food, I, however, found I got to become a very good cook. And you know why? Because all I thought about all day was food. And so, is that not something that could backfire for people with intermittent fasting? Because honestly, I mean, when I started eating more and eating much more nutritiously, I don't think about food nearly as much. I don't look at recipes the same way I used to. I mean, I don't need to as much either, but like my focus was always thinking about what am I going to cook, recipe to find, food, food, food. That was just on my mind.
But and that's where it's like so many it's like going in this the intuitive eating world where they go into this whole idea of any type of restrictive is inherently disordered eating and obsessive, which is an issue. There's a lot of benefits to the mantra of intuitive eating, but there's also some just like diet zealotry things, just like everybody else. And again, it's the mindset going into it. I think it plays a huge role. It doesn't matter if you're eating 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day, 6 meals a day. If you are creating a heavy caloric restrictive mentality, it's very restrictive and very fearful and very like, I need to be as lean as possible. And there's a very obsessive dogma to it. Those behaviors can happen, regardless if it's macro counting, regardless if it's intermittent fasting, regardless of whatever
Right. Yeah.
strategy it may be. I mean, you can even go to like the woman who just passed away in the last 18 months, 2 years, who was a raw vegan.
I don't know who this is.
Yeah, this happened in South America or
Okay.
something. She was a social media influencer and she was raw vegan and she was emaciated. She ate all the time. But and that was the whole point. She was eating a lot, as in volume,
Uh-huh.
but raw vegan. And so it was not a lot of nutrient diversity because there's not a when you get raw vegan, it's not there's not a
You're
lot.
limited.
You're very limited. And she slowly wasted away and died.
For how many years do you know?
Timeline, but it was
Okay.
more than you think. Because I mean, it takes a while.
Uh,
But that's the whole point. Like here's someone like being relatively plant-based.
Mhm.
There's some good health behind it. Like obviously we've had conversations about where animal foods can actually be healthy and supportive, but in general, like it's fine. And yet you can take something that's relatively healthy and take it to a very extremely unhealthy place. That's why I'm not a fan of diet culture in general, because I don't care what the diet is, unless you get nutritional context across the board, you can take it to a very unhealthy place, even though there's plenty of literature on the subject saying it's healthy. Like, I don't care, like,
Don't always listen to literature.
yeah. But it's the diet culture side of it.
Oh, I
though.
no, that's
Yeah.
why they don't. I mean, I'm just saying, like, people, you can tell them the truth, like, so convincing evidence, it doesn't always change people's minds.
The diet culture mentality has turned into a religious,
Kind of.
cultish type place where on a tangent of that, I think it's super important from a Christian lens, biblically. Questioning your faith and questioning things is actually a fundamental principle of the Bible. Like, I mean, with Jesus and the amount of times the disciples were challenging, questioning, and Jesus was like, hey, we'll work through this. But it wasn't this dogmatic, like, how could you even question? I think it's one of the things that's cool about Christianity. You're that walk with Christ and the biblical nature of it. It's like, it should be great to ask questions, because when you're in the truth, asking questions is a great thing. There's nothing
Right.
you get problems when it's like, no, don't ask questions.
Can't ask questions. Yeah, that is a problem.
Yeah.
So where were you going with that?
But just the dogmatic nature of a lot of diet culture is like, don't ask questions, just believe me.
Yeah.
And if you ask questions, it's bad.
Uh-huh.
Like, no, like that's not how you're gonna find truth
Oh, you do intermittent fasting of sorts.
in general.
Okay. And you do it for mainly to control calories, correct?
It's been such a behavior for the last 5 to 7 years
As a strategy
as a
for
strategy to
calories.
control calories.
Do you, and that obviously works for you.
Mhm.
Do you find any other benefit to it? Is there anything else you've noticed or thought about? No, that is
No.
it.
It's just calories. Like, because like technically they always talk about from a benefit side. I mean, you could argue my freaking A1C is 4.2, which is, guys,
Insane.
just so we're clear, my last A1C, which was a couple months ago, was 4.2, which is
Low.
ridiculous.
Low.
Is that potentially involving intermittent fasting and my lean muscle mass? It's the combination of all the above. I primarily eat fiber as my carb source. I don't eat a lot of, I mean, again, I do eat ice cream and stuff on
Right.
occasion, but
I'm so surprised it's that low.
4.2 is wild.
It's low.
And it's been confirmed, because actually 5 years ago it was 3.9 and now it's
Oh my
4.2.
gosh. Mine is not that low. I like my carbs more.
I like my carbs more, but you're leaner than me. Riddle me that.
Through that.
My A1C is 4.2. Body fat percentage, she's leaner than me.
What can I say?
So
See,
again,
carbs are not bad for you.
insulin people, carbs, sugar, blood sugar people, 4.2 A1C, 5.4 A1C. I have more body fat and have a higher body fat percentage than she does.
But he does have more muscle mass.
Yeah, I do.
Which we talked about.
Yeah,
That's being a possible reason.
And the food condensing, and
Yeah.
there's a couple variables in there.
Either way, our A1Cs are fine. Like it's not like an A1C of 5.4 is worse than a 4.2 or whatever. It's just I just find it fascinating.
Yep. And so like it's just become a behavior that I have. It's my neutral. Like I'm not afraid of eating breakfast, but my neutral is I have no problem just wait until noon, and then I get my first meal in.
Just make my eggs for myself. I'm happy, and you're happy.
I don't. People eat in front of me. I don't care. Like I don't. Sometimes I feel like people think they get mad, like self.
Oh, I can't eat because you're not eating.
It's very disrespectful. You're eating, but I'm eating. Just you eat.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm gonna eat what I want to eat.
Exactly, and I'm like, hey, if you want to eat, eat. If you don't, don't. It's not a big deal.
Cool. Anything else you wanted to add to this?
I think this is really good. This flowed really well. I think we got through the main nuts and bolts. And if you guys have any questions on intermittent fasting in particular, you're welcome to comment down below or ask any questions. And if you guys have any types of conversations, we have some really cool interviews coming up in shortly here on different really edgy topics that I'm quite excited about, and creating some collaborative type podcasts with more professionals to have like more of a roundtable discussion on topics in the West Michigan area, which is gonna be fun.
Going to be fun. So stay tuned. Get excited. Subscribe now.
And have a phenomenal day.
Yep. Bye.